Okay, hello and welcome to the next session in our Dynamics Cloud Essentials webcast series. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com, and this session looks at Dynamics ERP upgrade considerations and asks, what about the platform? Joining us for today's event are two ERP industry veterans. First is returning speaker, Rob Curls, a solution consultant at TriBridge, and we are glad to welcome him back. And we're also glad to welcome for the first time his colleague Rick Doss, a business solutions consultant manager at TriBridge. So as we get started, I just want to add that we do invite you to add your feedback and ask questions today during Rob and Rick's presentation. You can use the Q&A block that you'll see to the right of the main webcast panel. And at the end of the session, please do look for a survey that we will be asking you, and people who do fill it out will have a chance to win a $100 Visa gift card. So be on the lookout for that at the end. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome our first presenter today, Rob Curls. Rob, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Jason. So as Jason mentioned, for everybody that fills out the survey, they'll be entered for a chance to win a $100 Visa gift card, courtesy of TriBridge. So today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Microsoft lifecycle, as well as decisions that organizations go through when they're looking at migrating to the cloud. And then I'm going to hand it over to Rick, who will really talk about the upgrade roadmap for the Dynamics ERP solutions. As Jason mentioned, I'm Rob Curls. I'm a solutions consultant here with TriBridge in our Concerto Cloud practice. And I have the pleasure of working with organizations on the front side of their cloud journey to really determine what's a good solution for cloud, should it go private, should it go public, and help guide them through that. Rick, as Jason mentioned, also is a seasoned ERP consultant and solutions consultant here with TriBridge, who has great familiarity with all of the Dynamics ERP solutions. So in case you're not aware, TriBridge is a solutions consulting organization that predominantly practices within the ERP space. And we also have a deep team around application development, SharePoint consulting, security and infrastructure. We've been in business for a little over 15 years and have over 600 consultants nationwide. So Concerto Cloud is the practice that I'm specifically in within our TriBridge organization. And we have developed a world-class cloud platform that organizations can migrate their enterprise solutions to help them operate more efficiently, provide DR services around their mission-critical applications. As I mentioned, really we're built for complex. We believe that public clouds are great for simple applications like Office 365, but private clouds give organizations the security and the configuration they need to run their critical business processes. So what about the platform? So while you're out there, you're planning for your ERP upgrade. You have maybe a legacy system that maybe is a version or two out of date. Maybe you're running GP9 still. I know there are lots of organizations that are out there that are doing that. What should you be considering, when you're doing your next deployment? Really, we feel that it should move to the cloud. So most everyone knows that extended support for Windows XP ended in April of this year. And this product was key to each and every one of us in the past. Its moving off of support marks the end of an era as new versions and mobile applications and cloud-enabled apps are defining a new era of business productivity. But Windows XP isn't the only product that is going to cease from support this year. There are actually several products which will cease from being supported this month. Products that have been key to almost every organization over the past few years. Products like Exchange 2003, Office 2003, the 2003 version of SharePoint, all are moving off of extended support. There's actually a slew of products that have transitioned that your organizations may have been using today. And some of these may be moving from mainstream over to extended at this point. And while it isn't necessarily urgent to move those products over, the products that have gone end of extended support will be urgent to migrate over. And of these products, this is just 2014. 2015 leads in a whole other slew of products. Now, most organizations that are out there are still running Windows 7. I mean, not many companies have migrated totally to Windows 8. There might be some pockets within the organization that have adopted it. So we really need to start planning now for when these products go to end of extended support. So 2014 was the year of XP, where XP moved off that extended support, like I mentioned. In 2015, Server 2003 will also move off of extended support. And really, this operating system has been the core platform for most production implementations. So if you're talking about your GP10 instance or your GP9 instance, it's probably running on Server 2003. And the key here is going to be looking at the total organization, because there may be pockets of 2003 that are still implemented in branch offices outside of your corporate headquarters, that these pose a serious security threat to your organization. Because once extended support ends, there'll be no more security updates, and if that base still exists there, people will still target those older operating systems for a way into the organization. So I'll take a brief moment. We'll talk about Microsoft Support Lifecycle. So how does Microsoft Support Lifecycle policies affect an organization? So the Lifecycle policy applies to most products currently available through retail purchases or volume licensing and most future release products. It provides 10 years of support for business, developer, and desktop operating system products. And the support's divided into 5 years of mainstream support and 5 years of extended support. Microsoft also provides 5 years of mainstream support for its consumer and multimedia products and 4 years of mainstream support for consumer hardware products. So mainstream support for software products includes incident support, security updates, and the ability to request non-security hotfixes. While mainstream support for hardware products provides hardware replacement or parts, software and security updates, and support services. So this support is critical to your partner or your internal IT organization, because without it, they'll be unable to reach out for support or assistance in correcting an issue with the application if something does come up. So extended support still includes security updates. However, a separate support agreement is required for non-security related hotfix support. So if you're running, say, GP9, and there was a functional issue that stopped working, and your partner or your IT department wouldn't be able to leverage the support from Microsoft to be able to resolve those issues. It's only if there's an exploit that's found or that's publicized that then Microsoft would code an update for, if a product is in extended support. So what does this mean to me, and what are the risks that are associated with having some of these products in my organization? And it depends on the end of the mainstream versus the end of the extended support. So potential things to watch out for is, again, lack of support. You can't call Microsoft, and most organizations still rely on Microsoft for that top-level support. If something happens and your IT team can't figure it out, there's only so much internet searching they can do before they have to eventually, call Microsoft to help. So if it's end of extended support, like I mentioned, there's no more security updates. So I may find a vulnerability within an application and say, maybe it's an old app, maybe it's an old operating system like Server 2003, and they might not have I would say the lion's share of the deployment of operating systems, but there still could be several thousands or hundreds of thousands of them that are out there. And if they're no longer coding support or coding security updates, and I find this vulnerability, I could exploit it across the world, and I could take that and get into your network, and then from that machine, I could exploit other things that are going on or other machines that you have in your network. And with all of these big named organizations ending up on the front page these days, like Home Depot, the most recent Jimmy John's had some challenges where credit card information was obtained. It's not worth it. So operating in these environments, it's not necessarily like driving a car without a warranty. It's more like being a heart surgeon without malpractice insurance. So what can we do to help protect our organizations? What can we do to maintain our charters of what we're supposed to be doing as IT personnel? So most systems don't support an in-place upgrade. And even if it does, it's traditionally not a support or not a recommended model to do an in-place upgrade. I'm an old Exchange guy, and there's no way in the world that I would ever do an in-place upgrade of Exchange. It might be supported, but I'm not going to do that because I don't have a backout policy if I do that. Whereas I'd rather build up in parallel, and I'd rather migrate my systems and my users over to my new system that's been thoroughly tested, thoroughly vetted, and then I can move on and then decommission that old system. So we can do that if, say, we're running GP9 today, we want to upgrade to GP13 or 2013. We can do that and then set up a standard system next to it, go through the process of migrating the data, converting the data to the newest platform, newest version, and then bring my users on board. But just because we've always done it and just because we've always had on-premise systems doesn't mean that we should continue marching in that order. What got us here today might not get us where we need to go. So really we should be looking at alternative options. You know, what is the best solution? Just because I've been operating on this one platform, on this one operating system, this one application, doesn't necessarily mean that I need to continue marching on this same platform. Maybe there's another solution that's out there. Maybe there's a better ERP application or a better CRM system that's out there for me. And while we're going through this process today, let's look forward 5 to 7 years. What am I going to want to do in 3 years? Am I going to still be deploying on-premise? Am I going to be deploying everything in cloud in 3 years? If I'm going through the effort now, let's go ahead and let's future-proof our infrastructure. So real quick, we have a poll. Jason, if you could throw that up there, because we want to get an understanding of, you know, are you using any of these applications or any of these technologies in your existing data center? Should be over on the right-hand side. I'll give you a few minutes to a few seconds there to go ahead and put your answers in there.
The answers are still coming in, so we'll give it a few more seconds, and then we'll close it out. Say about maybe another 5 seconds here.
Okay. So it's funny, on cloud decision factors, we used to have the conversation with organizations of, well, maybe you should start looking at the cloud, or have you thought about the cloud? And really the conversations this time are, yeah, we're doing cloud, we already know that, and it's not even a question anymore. It's a matter of how will we deploy cloud? Are we going to go private? Are we going to go public? Where does it make sense to deploy this particular application? So it's very interesting. I am seeing that. So there's a very large amount of Server 2008, which is to be expected. Still a good amount of Server 2003. Very interesting. So customers move Dynamics to the cloud in order to deliver stronger solutions to their organizations. This includes delivering expanded functionality, integrations, upgrades, etc. Customers also move to the cloud in order to restructure support and maintenance, to supplement their internal resources, and for the related cost savings. So whether to upgrade and move Dynamics to the cloud is a personal choice, and the rationales vary depending by organization, but it's growing in popularity as organizations are opting to offload the care and maintenance of Dynamics to specialized providers like Concerto Cloud Services. So this is an interesting poll also. So it's a recent survey by 451 Research that demonstrates what customers expect from the cloud. As you can see, the top answers are they want to get new products or services to the market faster. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with customers where they say, I want to deploy my new version of CRM, or I want to deploy this new application, but my IT organization can't get the servers to me fast enough. But they've been waiting for 3, 4, 5 weeks, and they still aren't going to have anything for another 2 months for them. Between the process of obtaining the hardware, racking and stacking it, and getting it deployed, even in the virtual world, these organizations are operating at capacity, and they have to buy new products and new hardware each time they have these major initiatives. So there are pros and cons when considering an on-premise versus cloud deployment. As the market matures, the advantages are becoming much more prominent. Increased agility, the ability to deploy quickly, scale up and scale down over the resources it takes to spin up an environment internally. You can roll in support and application expertise as well. Higher availability for high-impact systems. I mean, how many organizations have DR built into their traditional IT systems? I know everybody wants to have DR. I live in Tampa, Florida, and I am no stranger to hurricanes. And I know every year around June 1st, everybody has exercises. Well, what are we going to do about hurricane season? This is the year that we're going to deploy a dual data center model, but they never really get around to it. going back to what I mentioned earlier of where are we going to put our information. And understanding really the pros and cons of both the single tenant model and the multi-tenant public option are critical when you're making these decisions. They said mail, it's a commodity service that goes in a multi-tenant environment. ERP depends on the size of your organization. If you're running really complex workloads and you're talking about integrations with lots of other systems for purchasing or fulfillment, then maybe a single tenant model is more up your alley and more appropriate for your organization. So the other factors that affect customers in this decision is the category or the class of the information that's going to be stored. And this really plays into the organization's risk tolerance. Is this high business impact data or low business impact data? Am I storing customer information out here? Do I trust the public cloud organization to store that customer data? What are the complexity requirements of the solution that I wanted to deploy? How much customization is going to be involved? With things like CRM Online, you can do some customization. You can tailor some things to look how you want it to. But if you want to do in-depth planning, you want to do all kinds of custom workflows, things like that, will that public offering meet your requirements? Another big factor that I've ran into with organizations as of late is lifecycle control. So how will an update affect your business process? So I've talked to many customers over the last few months where they had challenges where they were deployed in a public cloud model with an application, and they had customizations within that application, and there was a major upgrade coming. And when that upgrade rolled out, it was going to break those customizations and those business processes that their organizations depended on to operate and service their customers. So rather than just getting railroaded with the upgrade path, they elected, hey, I need to move out of this public model. This doesn't fit our needs anymore, and we need to move this application or this service into a private cloud model. As I was mentioning, today's organizations really aren't pushed into one deployment strategy or another. It's typically more of a hybrid solution where low business impact information goes in public, high business impact goes into private, or these more complex mission critical workloads. They're designed, and I should say the private cloud is designed really to service those complex workloads. So what should a cloud deployment include? There's a few questions that every person that's going into this endeavor should think about. So you have SaaS options or software as a service options. This is where everything from soup to nuts is included within your service. You don't have to worry about anything. DR is included, backups, the software itself, if it's not a proprietary application. Then you could have infrastructure as a service. And this is where we see organizations that are migrating more legacy client-server applications are moving to. They're moving those apps into that infrastructure as a service model. They want to be out of the data center business. They don't have to worry about backups and keeping the lights on and things like that. It's interesting, as of late, I've also had conversations with folks where they've looked at infrastructure as a service providers, and not all of them are created equal, where some of them charge you for restoring backups, or maybe disaster recovery isn't included. So make sure you ask those questions. What type of flexibility do they have? Can they grow elastically? Can they increase their workload and reduce their workload if it's necessary? The other question is, how does a restore happen? So if I did have data loss, how will I get my data back? Can we go through that exercise? Have you tested your DR strategy? Can we test that exercise? Can we do that annually or quarterly or whatever is necessary based on your organization's compliance requirements? And at this, Rick, I'd like to hand it over to you to go through the upgrade roadmaps of the Dynamics applications.
Sure, thanks, Rob. Well, there are occasions as we go through the process of looking at and planning for our upgrade and the mechanics of where we're provisioning multiple servers, server environments, test environments from our production environments. We're going to spend the next few minutes in each of the 4 Dynamics ERP solutions, Dynamics AX, GP, NAV, and SL. And I'm just going to highlight perhaps some of the complexities from what could be typically some users who are pretty far behind, some who might be fairly current. And just to give you some of the technical requirements that we've gathered from the Microsoft Upgrade Path site, just so that you can get an idea in planning for your upgrades. Maybe there's some complexity, and you might reference back to these data sets that might help you as you plan for those. So when we're thinking about our upgrade and upgrade activity, no matter which of the ERP solutions that we're looking at, we typically see there are kind of 4 silos of ways to look at it. From the goal of what are we going to benefit from a new version? So there are functional components that are typically brought out with newer versions, and we weigh those against not being on supported versions that Rob was speaking of. So I'm kind of speaking in the other area of what's new with the new application. You should be familiar with what new functions are available, and in some cases, what current functions may no longer be available, because Microsoft kind of manages that activity. They add new items and they take away some of that functionality. So you have to be aware of what is going to be new and what will no longer be available for you with a particular version. And then as you go through that process of looking at those goals, the functional designs, you should have a pretty thorough understanding of what the functional business scenarios of the new versions are going to provide for you to make sure that there are no surprises with it. Looking more technically at the data and looking at how you manage the data mechanisms, where you're looking at, you upgrade all of the ERP data in your current Dynamics system, or whether you're just upgrading a subset of data and balances. So sometimes during the process of looking at upgrade and upgrade paths, you may determine that this may be a time for us to change our chart of account structure. And so therefore, if we do that, how are we going to map old account structure to new account structure? Maybe we have a subset of a module that we're no longer using, and we wish to eliminate that from the newer version. So that's kind of what we're talking about in this regard is, are we moving everything, or are we just moving some of the components and maybe just some of the balances? So typical to maybe a fresh restart, but with some of the data components and history brought forward. If that's the case, what is the data volume? Do we need all of that? So those are typical questions from the analysis of looking at the data as a whole. From a company functionality standpoint, as examples of things to consider, do you have multiple companies? Do we share data? Has your structure changed to where you may have new entities that are going to be involved in the newer versions? Are you bringing some external systems online with the new operating system? Are we keeping those as cross-company, or bringing them as independent companies and wish to have maybe some improved intercompany activity or functionality? Do we have a need to merge some of our previous companies, and now our structure has changed, so we're actually merging some of the data between multiple companies into a single entity? So in addition to the functional areas of the organizational structure and the hierarchies related to that, there's also a very serious component in looking at what customizations, if any, do you have in place. Do we need those customizations moving forward? Is there new functionality in the updated versions that would indicate that perhaps we don't need to continue those customizations? Or if we do need them, are we going to implement or upgrade or just delete them if they're not necessary? And as you're going through this thought process, analyze within your own entities, how much are we capable of managing these tails? When you look at the complexity of the analysis and the goals, new functionality, do you need some assistance in helping you get to that process? Some of that assistance could be, as Rob was saying, where we look at some of the complexities in the next few slides that we talk about in setting up multiple data technology environments to move from older versions to newer versions. So let's jump off into Dynamics AX. Current version of Dynamics AX is AX 2012. In May of this year, R3 was released with AX 2012. So as you know, from a Microsoft perspective, there are roadmaps where Microsoft every year, 18 or 24 months, will provide product version updates and changes. There may be some technical fixes, some hot fix, some patching that's done in an interim. Sometimes there are cumulative versions of those updates that are available from Microsoft as well. But we're going to look kind of more specifically at the versions in our remainder of our discussion today. So at a highlighted level, and just so you'll know, I have maybe 5 or 6 kind of detailed slides. We're not going to review in intimate details related to each of the ERPs, but I want to give you a sense of, pick on here on the left column in your source. If you are all the way back at AX4, perhaps Service Pack 2, and we look at what the supported upgrade paths are, we kind of see that over on the right side of this slide. So you can see that there are direct and indirect models to manage some of the upgrade components. So from a complexity of, let's say you're on Microsoft Dynamics AX 2009, maybe it's Retail 1 and Retail 2. You kind of have to do an indirect upgrade. Indirect meaning you must refresh AX 29 for the R2 in order to move on to the next level to move it up to AX 2012. So as you see, moving all the way to the next to the last item, the AX 2012 feature pack. So in some cases, an in-place upgrade on a single system, maybe not having to do source to target workflow related to that. I would caution to say that the in-place upgrade that we're speaking of here is not necessarily in your production environment, because Rob has already given us good best practice to say that that is not the way to do it. You do want to make sure that you have test facilities to be able to manage the upgrades. So that's not what I'm referring to as an in-place upgrade, other than a test environment can be upgraded in place. When we look in AX 2012, there are projects from a development component that allow us to do either a source to target upgrade model, a data transfer. Sometimes there's time limitation on those to be able to do that in place. And both of those are really regarding a technical upgrade. We may have a restarting from scratch in that case, if I'm moving from 2009 to 2012. Microsoft is continuing to source and to provide some tool sets to help with that migration. 6 months ago, it would have been more frequent that it was not an in-place upgrade and not necessarily a model to transition from 09 to 2012. It was kind of like a re-implementation. We're still finding that to be very much the case. But as the tool sets improve their functionality, we'll be able to see that Microsoft does have a goal in mind of providing a tool set to migrate from 9 to 12. When we look at some of the technical changes related in AX 2012, certainly one of the things from a support feature is that Oracle is not supported anymore. that we are looking at SQL Server 2008 and 2012. Again, that's important. As Rob was saying, it's not necessarily just the ERP components, the AX provisions of support or not in the Microsoft environment. It does include the server and the operating systems as well. So there are some technical changes in 2012 that such as the increase in the tables and the relationships, the ability to provide partitions between legal entities. The AIF and Enterprise Portal has kind of been rebuilt and some partial migration is there. So for reasons of the technical changes between previous versions in 2012, there are some requirements that require some intense scrutiny. We're continuing in that lane. Relates to security. It's been different. Reporting engine is now the SQL Server reporting services. We're not supporting, from Microsoft perspective, the X++. In that regard, code storage is migrated. It's in a separate database model. And the infrastructure is changing significantly to be able to help manage the improvements in performance and the details from the structural changes within 2012 also. The organizational structures between the data elements of companies and the sharing relationships are different. Ledger, financial is different. Transactions, products are different. There are quite a bit of significant changes that really are not providing a level field to just say, let's push the button from 09 to move it to 2012. Just kind of a quick look at some of the technical requirements related to the Windows client operating system and Enterprise Portal. I'll follow the model in each of the three other ERP systems to show you the client operating system, an Enterprise Portal or Business Portal if there's one available, as well as the server components for it also. So let's spend a few minutes and we'll review some of the details around Dynamics GP. So for example, the roadmap for Dynamics GP, if we look, and we're in the second half of 2014, so we've already had the release from Microsoft of GP 2012 R2. This is just kind of it's general knowledge of information around what the highlighted areas of the roadmaps are. Additional functionality changes, workflow, additional companion apps, apps for mobile devices, increased functionality with Office 365. There will be a pretty significant change in the GP 2015 related to the service-based architecture. So keeping an eye on what's coming in the future certainly helps in looking at what your plans for upgrade will be. So caution in the GP 2013 space. Depending on the version that you're coming from GP, you may have multiple upgrades in order to get to the current version or versions of GP 2013. So again, kind of a map walking through some previous versions. Are there still some users on Windows 2000 and SQL 6.5? There could be. Rob's given us some of the critical functional areas for staying on those are. But again, our task on this section is just to highlight some of the technical requirements and perhaps the path that you may have to go from an earlier version, such as 9, that Rob was speaking of. And depending on version 9, which of the service pack releases that you are may require a multiple upgrade path in that regard. So we'll see there are several slides here just from a level of complexity, and that was really my goal, was to show you that as we march through the technology advances that Microsoft has provided over the years, the ability to upgrade is getting easier in the sense that if you stay on a fairly current path and fairly current supported level of your products, that Microsoft and GP will make it a bit easier for you to not necessarily have multiple technology platforms in order to move your versions on up to current released states. So more typically, we see Dynamics GP9. This is kind of an older one. We're not seeing very many of those yet. GP10, as we're starting to see that being unsupported and then moving on up into GP 2013. The improvements in the SQL Server, the Windows servers that are going to be available for this level as well. So still a couple of slides on different versionings of GP10 and different versionings of SQL that may still be out there, so that there are more technical components, and in these cases, and actually this one, you actually would have to have multiple technical environments to be able to move these on up into the current state. So finally, when we get to the component of GP 2010, that's kind of the one down from 2013. A test environment, you can do a direct upgrade within that test environment. There are certain build numbers that you have to be careful of in that regard. I've made references to some of the knowledge base articles and references, so if you would like to have a copy of the presentation that we have here, that may help you in some of your review and looking through those stages. So in looking at 2013, just from a technical perspective, the operating system, server operating system, SQL Server reporting services, you get an idea of the components of the versions of Server and Windows that are acceptable for this different release. Let's move on to Dynamics NAV. Dynamics NAV 2013. So here we are on the 25th of September in 2014, and in just a few days next week will be the official launch of NAV 2015. Will be available for general release next October, in October next month. So I'm not really, I'm just mentioning that in today's presentation, not providing details yet related to upgrade components to NAV 2015. But if we look at the roadmap, again, we see there are some changes. In development right now that we're looking at in NAV 2015, that development has been locked down and release is coming. Again, Office 365 integration, more Power BI. You'll find that a theme from the Microsoft perspective, that we're showing more capabilities of business intelligence, built-in graphics, KPIs, reporting within the applications themselves. So where do we see NAV? Surprisingly, NAV in a global environment and also in the U.S., we find some users that are still using some previous versions, maybe NAV 5. Those are kind of way back there. They've been working continuously, solid, but in some cases there are some complete changes to be able to move to those. So in this case, looking at things prior 5 and before, you can directly move to NAV 2009 Service Pack 1. But moving then from 2009 up to 2013, you would have an intermediate upgrade requirement for it. So a full upgrade to 2009, you kind of divide those into two parts. Again, we're just not telling or teaching you how to do it, just giving you some details of a contrast between the process and in some cases a very technical process to do that multiple step upgrade. A platform upgrade of the executables on the server and client. And then there's the application of the objects and the data themselves. So a two-stage process to manage to move it into NAV 2009. So when we think of the application upgrade, we look at the code of the objects, transforming those objects within the database. 2009 filtered in the ability of using a role-tailored client. So the classic client and role-tailored were both optionals with that particular version, but choosing the role-tailor had some specific metrics related to if you're choosing to use that one. The data upgrade, converting the database and the previous databases into the data model within 2009 would have been another step related to it. The object upgrade, where the developer's toolkit and the database archive would allow you then to manage the upgrade, the recompiling of the objects within NAV itself. That object transformation was only necessary if you're moving up to the role-tailored client. So that's what I was referring to, that for those folks who continue to use the classic client in 2009, that part wasn't necessary. However, the classic function was removed in 2013. So knowing if you're moving from previous versions to 09 to 2013, that you are moving away from that classic client completely. The data upgrade, again, provided a toolkit with manual and guides to help you moving into that particular database model. And a particular note there, our process where we did this for our customers provided that there were some difficulties sometimes in managing service packs or hot fixes. So we would recommend that you talk with Microsoft or your Dynamics partner before you start managing those service packs as you march through those different upgrade scenarios. Finally, the upgrade into NAV 2013. So you can go from Service Pack 1 or R2 of NAV 09. If you're not in that stage, you'd have to upgrade to that R2 version of 09. Then that second upgrade step would put you into 2013. Again, I'll list the technical requirements for the client, a web client, which was introduced with 2013, which is gaining increasing importance. NAV 2015 provides a tablet function as well, so more consideration on the platform. The NAV server and also on the portal and integrations to SharePoint and the updated operating systems. Spoke a bit about NAV 2015. There is a rapid start upgrade for the code, a rapid start upgrade for the data. So I'm just mentioning that to say if you're thinking of upgrading and looking at that, Microsoft again is providing more functionality in their tool sets to make that rapid migration to move. So let's spend a few moments on the last section with Dynamics SL. Again, from the SL, the current version really was SL 2011. We'll see that SL9 is soon to be released. Again, the small and medium-sized business marketplace, a new next gen of the user interface will be provided with that, so things are going to look a little bit differently in that regard. In 2013, the SL Project Web Client, another addition to functionality in SL. So SL, when we look at that, previous versions, 6, 6.5, 7, we see that there are sometimes two options. In some cases, you could go direct to SL 2011. In some versions, you could go with option 1 or option 2. We'll talk about those in a moment. So it's important to know your particular versioning of SL when you're looking at that upgrade path. So we look from SL, you have to remove that earlier release, removing it from all workstations, then from the server, and then you're going to upgrade the database tables, views, stored procs to be able to see the details within SL 2011. So kind of a summary of those components, if you recall back to our earlier high-level function of what to do in thinking about an upgrade of versions, looking at customizations. So typically in SL we see many customizations from export components, making sure that we have all of those exported and stored to be able to migrate them into the new system should we need those. Again, deciding which of those that we do need. And so in this case, again, just making sure we've cleaned off the entire entity infrastructure with the older versions before we start the upgrade to the server and to reinstall at the workstation level. Older versions of SQL, having to upgrade and perform upgrades to the SQL servers, and this is key for really all of these components, is that not all versions work on all versions of SQL Server. So that's where having a cloud option to be able to manage some of that migration task, if you're close enough to be able to migrate and upgrade without having to reinstall, makes it a bit easier to provide the environments, technical environments for that. So a few notes related to SL 2011. The SharePoint Foundation, SharePoint servers required if you're using the doc share, so that may be additional functionality that you haven't used previously with SL. If you are using terminal services for SQL Server 08, you do have to install the client then on the terminal server. That makes sense. And then particularly if you have a release of Crystal reports for earlier versions to 2008, you do have to remove that component as well, since SL relies heavily on Crystal reports for their reporting components. And again, I'll give you a summary of the technical requirements for the operating, the client, server, the database, and for the portal framework as well. So with that, Rob, let me pass it back to you. We've talked about several of the technical details related to the 4 ERP components, but maybe you might recap some of these items that we talked about and how the cloud could come to help us.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned before, what got us here today probably won't get us where we want to be in the future. So cloud is a strategy that is here to stay. That, I mean, I would say probably everybody that's listening on the call is adopting some form of cloud technology in their business today. Moving on, I think we have a Q&A section. If anybody wants to go ahead and put their questions into the question box, be happy to either answer them myself or have Rick answer them. Rick, question, isn't GP 2015 due out in December of this year?
It is, yes. So there is another one coming, and it's we really didn't talk about it from an upgrade path. We're still kind of getting some details and seeing some excitement about what that looks like, but yes, we do have 2015 of GP that's coming out. Microsoft has been pretty busy this year.
Definitely. One thing I would add to that too is that, as with any enterprise application, early adopters are always on the bleeding edge. Most organizations with a lower risk tolerance would wait on the deployment of 2015 when it comes out. That's always a personal preference. Amy H. asked if we'll be sending out copies of these slides. Amy, we can absolutely provide them to you if you're interested. I know there's some great information that Rick had presented about the roadmaps.
Yeah, there was a question in my slide deck. I had SL, let's see, I think it was SL9. It actually is also 2015. So depending on which slide deck and the timing of it, it changes somewhat. But 2015 is the component of SL9. Thanks, Rick.
Bruce asks if we're aware of any customers that are running Dynamics AX 4.0 in a cloud environment. I am aware of a few customers that are running it. I would say that It's probably not our preference when we talk to organizations. We prefer to push them into having the upgrade to 2012. I know within Concerto we've kind of standardized at this point, saying 2009 really is the latest or the oldest edition that we would go back. Let's see, Rick, this one's a good one for you. Then asked, would it make sense to upgrade GP 2013 R3 or wait for GP 2015 or potentially an R4 of 2013?
Well, that's always a good question. When do we upgrade? Well, one, we look to see, is the current version that we're on, are we in danger of being on a non-main support or extended support? So answering that question kind of is the first task. Then it's a matter of functionality. So if you're looking at functionality of how you're using GP now, so for example, in some versions there was field service, and now that's been deprecated from the Microsoft component. In future releases of GP, they will be eliminating the business portal. So some of the ways to answer that question would depend on which functional areas of GP are you using. Are they going to still be in place with those future releases? And is there any new functionality that would be important for me to take care of? Have I been putting off doing something, or has my business model changed where there may be some new things that GP does better to consider doing that upgrade? I would say, from being a conservative nature, and as Rob just indicated, sometimes being on the initial edge is not always a good thing. In some cases it is. It just depends on what that functionality is, your level of risk that you're wishing to take for the functions that you gain. So it's a balance of what you're getting with maybe an inherent risk of maybe there's something that's not going to work just exactly right. But that's where having a test environment and fully vetting that version that you wish to go to make sure that all of your business scenarios are working correctly. And in some cases, sometimes we're just surprised, and we work with Microsoft to help get a current hotfix out. Other software providers in the smartphone business, as of this week, have discovered the same thing. Sometimes putting something out there, you're pretty sure that things work well until you get it out in the public domain, and then somebody finds issues related to it. So it's kind of a personal decision of weighing what you're giving up with the need of what you're getting, and whether it's worth it to wait.
Thanks, Rick. So John has a question. In a private cloud, do you run the applications and SQL Server on the same platform? I would say that it's our best practices not to. So if we're operating GP in a cloud environment, we're leveraging something like remote desktop services or Citrix to do the presentation of the application. So we in our DBAs hate having anything co-located on our SQL servers. So we typically have a SQL server and then a separate application server. Whether if it's GP, then it's just an RDS server. If there's a business portal function, we'll have a separate business portal server. If it's NAV, there'll be the NAV application server and then a remote desktop server, or you could be using strictly the web client with it, or even the WAN client. Another question was, what about coupling to cloud from on-site and vice versa? Then if you could clarify, I don't quite understand the question.
I would say, kind of maybe at a high level, from our ERP instances, we often have other applications that are integrated to the ERP systems. And so where we may have our cloud, or maybe the ERP is on premise, and there's an integration from e-commerce or web services that is coming from another cloud type service. So at a high level, those are just connectivity issues, and we seem to manage those pretty well depending on what those applications are. In some instances, it may make sense to have have both of the applications existing in the same private cloud or hybrid cloud, but it's not a requirement that it has to be. We often see it just varies, but the capabilities are there.
Then, if I understand the question correctly, having the possibility of having data maybe in the cloud and on-premise, or leveraging it maybe for both, the interface to the cloud. I would say that we do have some customers that are maybe operating on production and then migrating workloads up to the cloud as need be. With Dynamics, we typically don't see that. That's more in line with, say, applications that are sensitive to specific times of the year, to where maybe I'm operating on a particular workload that most of the year I'm operating at 60%, nothing big, and then I know that at holiday times I have an increase in traffic, I'm doing some type of shipment of gift baskets. Then maybe they'll move their websites over to another environment, then scale out. Hope that answers the question. John has a question also about the slide deck, if it will make it available. I posted in the chat that if you'll send me an email, rob.curls, C-U-R-L-S, @tribridge.com, I'd be happy to send you a link to the deck.
There was another question from Chris about compatibility, maybe some of the challenges or difficulties with Management Reporter and Forecaster. And he was indicating that there have been some problems with that in the past, particularly about moving from an upgrade perspective. So some of the correct answer to that question may depend on which ERP that you're using with Management Reporter and which version of Forecaster that you're using also. It does vary. For example, AX uses a data mart with its version of Management Reporter, so it's a bit different. And its connectivity to Forecaster then is different from, let's say, SL or GP in that regard. But there were some major releases and updates to Management Reporter in the spring of this year that added some additional functionality, particularly in moving them to a different version, a different level, again, from FRX to Management Reporter being SQL-based rather than that Access-based. So if you would maybe send us a specific question about versions that you're on and the ERP system to my email address, and that's rick.doss@tribridge.com, I'd be happy to do a little investigation for you.
Great. Jason, I don't think we have any other questions. Would you like to take us out?
Yeah, we will close things out now. We will also be sending out an alert when the session's available on demand, and we'll include links to Rick and Rob's email addresses there too if you think of any other questions after the fact. So, yeah, Rick, Rob, thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
And,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks to everyone in the audience for the great questions. We will wrap it up there. Please do be on the lookout for the survey. So that concludes this event. Thanks, and have a great day.